Manufacturers are struggling to stay in business as foreign exchange shortages spawned by the collapse in oil prices means they're having trouble importing raw materials. The industry's difficulties are the latest signs of strain in Nigeria's foreign exchange regime. The central bank was pushed to make a technical devaluation in March as income from crude sales that generated about 90% of the nation's export earnings dried up. Foreign investors looking to repatriate their funds have been asked to be patient, and members of the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria so far have been unable to access current FX for the past 5 weeks. Report says there is a roughly $1 billion backlog of unmet demand, this according to Bloomberg. Joining me to discuss these developments is Jerry Nnebue, financial analyst at Cardinal Stone. Good morning to you, Jerry. Thank you for joining us on the Global Business Report. Starting with Nestle, what's your take on their performance?
Hi, Rotissia. Thank you for having me. So Nestle's performance, we did see some moderation in earnings at the end of the quarter, and that's largely came, from increase in operating expenses. So apparently, we saw some higher logistics and distribution costs during the quarter in terms of the firm being able to move out some of its products. Overall, if you look at the performance, other than that, we still see some sort of resilience in Nestle's Q1 performance. We're seeing better performance, especially in the beverage segment of the business. I think the company was able to push out more volumes compared to the food segment of the business where volumes kind of contracted. Other good things about the result that we saw was improvement in gross margin. So gross margin improved about 100 basis points, which shows the strength and efficacy of the firms and value chain in terms of position of raw materials and supplies for production, which we think can be a game changer, especially in the regime that we find ourselves in, where companies are finding it difficult to source materials, especially those that have to import. I think Nestle sources about 80% of its raw materials domestically, which is very good for local content, very good for production costs, and very good for gross margin support. We also noticed that the firm was able to pay down about 13 billion of its debt, almost all of the debt. So Q1, there's almost no debt sitting on Nestle's book, which we think is going to be earnings accretive, and it also helps the firm, prevent against the potential impact of devaluation, because most of, about 50% of the firm's loans are actually intercompany loans, and these loans are actually denominated in foreign currency. So the fact that they're able to pay this down in Q1 also helps, to support prospective earnings going forward in terms of valuation impact and also interest expenses.
Oh, great stuff. Now, for Q2, though, I mean, if we're seeing this essentially, them treading water as far as profit after tax is concerned, for the second quarter, you think things might get a little tougher, since that's a projection for pretty much the entire country and all the companies that are operating here?
Yeah, I mean, the likelihood of that is there. We think things may get tougher. In as much as, to our mind, Nestle still has a resilient business model to be able to scale through this kind of waters. However, we think that Q2 will be a bit tougher given the restrictions we're seeing. I mean, take, for example, the beverage segment of the business. Nestle is big on bottled water. So if you have to cancel shows in the hotel, you have to cancel shows in the lot of event center. And these guys normally take Nestle bottled water. So you can imagine the impact that's going to have on the defense performances. So yes, the fact that we're not going to be seeing a lot of large or mass gatherings, weddings, shows and events, this can obviously affect the demand for the product. However, we're also expecting to see improvements in retail demand, because we're going to have to consume. Most of the defense products are actually very defensive in terms of margin, in terms of water, in terms of other beverages that the firm produces. So yeah, we think that there will still be some demand for some of the defense products. However, it may not be as strong as we've seen in Q1.
All right, thank you for that. Okay, let's move from Nestle now to the FX situation being faced by manufacturers. I believe the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria was quoted here saying they're having some trouble getting access to FX. But the central bank did put out a circular stating that they would be making foreign exchange available to, for education, also for manufacturers who need to import raw materials. So how do you see things there in that regard?
Yes, I think right now we have to also consider the fact that the central bank, in fact, economy as a whole is in dire straits, in a very difficult position, given what we're saying regarding COVID-19 and the potential impact on oil prices as well. And given that Nigeria, 10% of our budgets, from the oil sector, almost 70% of government revenues is coming from oil. So that in itself has great implications for everything, government revenue, implications for FX reserves, and FX earnings. What we are saying currently is an allocation or a prioritization of allocation to sectors in terms of FX from the central bank. And as it stands, for what we know, I think the federal government and the CBN per se are kind of prioritizing FX allocations to healthcare and pharmaceuticals. Other aspects of manufacturing, we're not seeing so much support in that regard, irrespective of the fact that the CBN has come out to say that they will try to meet or match demand in the market. We're really not seeing that. What we're saying is prioritization of these other sectors, which are key to the overall health of the economy, healthcare and pharmaceuticals. And I think part of what the federal government, and other authorities are trying to drive at right now is to boost local content in raw materials being used by manufacturers. Like I said, for Nestle, about 80% of French raw materials are sourced domestically. Even the federal government, in terms of fiscal objectives, in terms of CAPEX implementation, they're trying to zero down on importation of certain materials for implementation of projects and focus largely on locally sourced materials. And I think this is probably going to be the situation for the next time. Not a very good one for manufacturers. People take right now, you're not seeing a lot of demand for these discretionary items, electrical supplies, automobiles, and other items that probably would not be very, very necessary for survival right now, given the lockdown, given the lack of economic activities. So I think that's something that we'll have to consider. Manufacturers will probably continue to find it difficult to access FX until the situation subsides.
All right, thank you for that. Now, I don't know if this is a good example. Can we use Russia? I don't know if they faced something similar, maybe with sanctions from the West and them having to do what you just described, what the federal government is pushing as far as local content is concerned. Is that a good example?
Yeah, I think that's one example that we can look at. 2016, when the EU and the US had to place sanctions on Russia because of the activities in Ukraine. I think the country had to look inwards to be able to stimulate and support domestic activities. Typical implements and materials that they would have imported, they had to look for ways to source all of this domestically. And I think, to my mind, that this kind of puts Russia in a better position right now compared to most other countries, where, given the lockdown, they don't have to start going back to the scratch to see what they can do domestically to improve the situation of the economy, because they've actually been in this situation for quite some time right now, where economic activities in the global scheme of things has almost no implications for them, because they can hardly import certain items and they can hardly export certain items. Okay,
but Jerry, the push for local content, there's not something that can happen overnight. Yes, this is it's a gradual thing. In Nestle, of course, we just talked about them. They have the capacity to do that, large company. But for smaller manufacturers, I think, it is going to take a little while. Or how do you see things there?
Well, it may take a little while, but what is important is the fact that the government realizes the need for it. As part of the response to this COVID-19 pandemic, the government has set up the Economic Sustainability Committee. And part of the objectives of that committee is to see how the government or the economy will be able to survive another economic recession. Even if there's a recession, to make sure that it's not as deep as it was in 2016. Now, part of the initiatives was to push for local content drive in a lot of government initiatives. For example, the government is looking for ways to be able to scrap the use of bitumen in the road constructions and focus solely on cement. That is positive for FX savings. Government is looking for ways to boost low-cost housing in the economy. Now, what they plan to do for low-cost housing is to also ensure that almost 100% of implements used for these low-cost houses are sourced domestically. So what the government is trying to do, other than FX savings, is also use as an opportunity to stimulate consumption by employing local artisans to be able to drive this. So the push for local content would also mean that there will be opportunities for local job creation, as a lot of manual labor will be needed to be able to drive the production of some of these things. We saw a bit of it during the period of border closures that happened in late 2019, local content manufacturing of some of those things that hitherto were imported from neighboring countries. These kind of things to support the informal sector will support job creation. We also support demand, which is very, very key to preventing a deep reading recession that we saw in 2016, and also safe efforts for the importation of these documents. So while it may not happen overnight, but the fact that they're actually taking these initiatives and realizing the need for this is something that is positive.
All right, Jerry, we only got about 30 seconds. You talked about demand as far as local content is concerned. Will that filter into the equities market, like the cement example, in like 20 seconds, really briefly?
Well, it may filter in, but then again, what also drives the equities market is investors' perception of how long this whole COVID-19 pandemic is going to last. And right now, the conversation is going from not just how long it's going to last, but how bad things can really get. And that's the big uncertainty in the market. And I think that kind of outweighs every other thing that we're seeing in the market funds.
All right. Jerry Nnebue, our analyst at Cardinal Stone, thank you so much for taking us through Nestle's first quarter results as well as the situation with the manufacturers and foreign exchange. We appreciate your insight, sir.